This video is a follow-up after grading most of your week 3 string and scanner problem sets. I noticed several problems, and in video conference we realized there was something that was missing in the instruction. So let me just go through an example with you. This is 3.21 process name, and this one people did not have too much problem with, but universally, I guess there was one particular issue. Let me show you. So first of all, I want to point out that in pretty much all the coding problems, there is a button to fill in the header if you want to get started. So you really shouldn't need this. You should always be trying to figure out what the header is for yourself. This was a method problem, so I know I'm going to declare a public static, and then I have to look for what the return is. It's going to take a scanner as a console. So here, I'll just do it public static, and then I think it's just going to print. So it's going to be a void, and then it's going to be process name, and then it's going to be a scanner. I'll just call it SC. So I think that is going to be the header, but if it doesn't work, I can always click on show header. So watch what I've got here now, and then I'm going to replace it. So yes, I had the same. They called it input, but it doesn't matter. So because you want to make sure that you're using the right returns and the right inputs, and I'll go on to explain that a little bit more. But so that's one thing. So let me show you what people have been doing. And so first of all, I've told people I do not recommend that you do this in Eclipse, but people have, so let's go ahead and do it in Eclipse and show you the problems. So here's what I might try if I was in Eclipse. I have to go ahead and put an import. Notice you don't have to do that in PracticeIt. I would create a full public class and main that creates a scanner and then calls my routine process name. So people have been figuring out how to do this because that's what you see in the book. Okay, notice none of this is necessary in PracticeIt, but people have been doing it anyways. So notice that we spent a lot of time generating code that we didn't need to generate. Finally, we get down to this piece of code here. And people have figured out generally that it needs to look like this, but the first thing they do is probably they ended up with the code that says scanner. They redeclare another scanner here. I'm just going to say sc2 equals new scanner system.in. Okay, so then they've got this here, and let's just for the moment just do a system.out.println of the input was followed by sc or sname. Okay, so I got a little bit of code here to delete. Okay, so let's try running this. It asks for a full name. We say George, and the input was George. Okay, I didn't have a space there, but so that runs. And then we think, okay, great. So all I got to do is, I'll go ahead and fix this here. All I got to do is take all this stuff here, copy it, go back to PracticeIt, paste this all in, and voila, it should work. And it doesn't. Problem context error. Expected method, but found a program. Could not find simple method process name scanner. So what it's complaining about is you've written a whole program here. This is a whole program, and all it was looking for is the process name scanner. Okay. So that is the error, okay? Let me tell you how to fix it, and then let me try to explain more what's going on here. So what you have to do to fix it is you have to get rid of everything except for this process name routine here, including there's an outer bracket that needs to be removed now. So now I've got this. So now let's try running it. Okay, so there was a big delay, which I've edited out, and then it finally comes back with this. Enter your full name, timeout, infinite loop, through no such exceptions, no tokens remain in input. So let's look at what happened here. Now this is not quite what you're going to see because I only scanned one thing here, but the problem is that it is scanning on the system in. That means what the user types in Eclipse, okay? And we are not running in Eclipse. So when you do this code, it compiles, but what actually is happening is that Eclipse is running your code in its own little Java virtual environment, and there is no system in that Java virtual environment. Okay, there is no, I mean, just think about it. Where would you type in the input? There's nowhere to type it in. So so this is not going to work. What's happening is it's trying to read it from the system input. Nothing ever comes into the system input. All right, so how do we fix this again? And then I'll explain more what's happening. So what we do is we got to get rid of this scanner. Notice that they passed in a scanner. People are just completely ignoring the scanner, okay, and then declaring their own because that's what you see in the book. But that's not what is called for here. They are telling you to pass to accept a scanner, and that's the scanner you're going to use. So all I got to do is use their scanner. Now let's see what happens. Okay, so it immediately came back. Now it's not going to work because I didn't do the problem as it was asked, but now it provides Sammy Jenkins. Your name is, oh, that's the expected. And what happened is you enter your full name, Sammy Jenkins, and then I printed out the input was Sammy. Okay, so it works. It does. I didn't do the program, but it at least executed properly. So now let me explain a bigger point about what is going on here. Why are they insisting on me taking a scanner? So this is what we call a test harness, and this is really beyond the scope of this class, but this is extremely important in real production environments. So when you write, say you get hired by Microsoft to work on Excel, and you are hired to write code to handle when somebody inserts a cell, okay? So great, you write this code, you run it, but how does Microsoft know that it works in all possible circumstances? The way they make sure it works is they have what's called a test harness, which calls your code. Imagine this is the code here to run the insert, okay? So the test harness is going to call your code with 1, 10, 100,000, 10,000 different samples of inserting cells to see whether it works. Okay, so if you write in here your own thing saying scanner sc equals new scanner system.in, or similarly in Excel you hard code in that it's only going to take in what the user's mouse is doing, okay, there is no way to run all those tests. Okay, somebody's actually got to sit there and go through 10,000 tests. What the test harness does is by taking the input as a parameter, you might imagine it in Microsoft Excel, instead of watching the user, what the user is doing, instead we just get input saying which cell is he inserting at and what is he inserting, what's the data, okay? By doing it like this, now the test harness can call us 10,000 different ways and simulate, okay? Now there's another part that is even less covered in this class and is completely not needed for you, but the other thing I want you to think about at least is, what about this part, the system out println? Just like I was complaining that if you say system in, the scanner is system in, there's no way for the test harness to provide that input. If I do this, it makes it very challenging for the test harness to test the output. Now, PracticeIt has done some very clever work to actually harness the system out, and it actually compares your system out. But in real production environments, you don't do printlns, okay? In real production environments, you write a function that is basically called debug, okay? And that function can be modified depending on whether you're testing or not. And then this text here can be logged to a file or can be compared automatically, whatever. Okay, so that part isn't necessary, but you do need to know that you don't want to be always declaring your own scanner. You want to, number one, be using the text here to understand what it says. Number two, if that doesn't work, click on Show Header, okay? And then number three, when it does give you a scanner, you need to use it. Don't create your own scanner. All right, so that's one example. Let me show you another example. This is from Chapter 3G. And here, there was a problem before this one called Mickey Box where you have to draw a box, okay? Then this asks you to modify that program into a new class Mickey Box 2. The method should accept 3 parameters, the graphics, and its 2 ints specifying the x, y, okay? So in this case, they actually give you this thing here. They normally don't do that. So I'm going to go ahead and click on Show Header. Oh yeah, that's all it gives you. So what you're going to do is you're going to have some code here, and that code is eventually going to call draw figure with a graphics G and some X and some Y. Up here you're going to have to actually get the graphics from the drawing panel. And then you're going to have, and this is actually going to be a main. Okay, so this is going to be inside main, and then, and I really hate it when people do not indent properly, so I'm going to do that. Okay, so that's the main, and then the next thing you're going to define your, here, let me just copy it. You're going to copy your public stack, blah, blah, blah. Nope, it's not going to let me paste it. Public static void draw figure, which is going to accept a graphics G int X int Y. And then inside this guy, now you're going to use that graphics, so you're going to do a g.drawRect of x starting at xy with some width and height. Okay, so to remind us again, so what this is showing is another example of a test harness. Okay, so well, it's not quite a test harness because they're actually having you draw the full class here, but you're making it so that it can be called by a test harness by accepting the graphics G here rather than inside this method. You could have instead called you're going to get a drawing panel dp equals new drawing panel, etc., and then you could have done that. Now you could do a graphics G2 equals dp dot get graphics, and you see this in the book a lot. They get the drawing panel and they call the graphics. So why is it we're not doing that? Because we're making it so that it could be called by a test harness, or more generally that this code here, which may be very useful, can be called anywhere in the program. But more generally than that, this graphics here can be any graphics context. So this is beyond the scope of the course, but the whole point of drawing panel is actually to provide a test harness. Inside drawing panel, the authors have created a bunch of functions so that when you call g.drawRect, it's actually logging that and counting how many times you call g.drawRect. And it doesn't matter to you, but it does matter to PracticeIt. Okay, so I think I've explained several times now about harnesses and why when they tell you to accept the graphics or the scanner or whatever, that's what you need to use. Okay, this is oftentimes about input and output. Another thing that people don't understand is, why do we need to use PracticeIt? If I can do this code in Eclipse, why isn't that good enough? Okay, so let me address that. So especially with graphics, so for example, with graphics, you're going to be drawing a bunch of really complicated figures, and if you just write that on your own, you can't tell if a line is off by 1 pixel. Okay, whether it be, you may put y plus 25 when actually it's y plus 26. You cannot tell that, okay? Nor can I when I'm looking at your code. But PracticeIt can. It actually looks at the figure you drew, does a bitmap comparison to what it wants, and tells you exactly what the problem is visually. And that's another example of the kind of thing that PracticeIt can do that I cannot. The other thing is that you've probably noticed by now that there are many tests that PracticeIt runs. It doesn't just run one test on this code. It runs 4 or 5 tests, okay? So that's another thing that you cannot do. If this were another course in my, well, let's say the old days, when we wrote something like this, we would also need to write 10 or 20 test cases. Run those 10 or 20 test cases, turn in the results, etc. So PracticeIt is doing you a huge favor by doing this, okay? I would like to understand better why people think they need to use Eclipse rather than PracticeIt. I think there may be some valid reasons, but the two answers are, number one, if you want to do practice things in Eclipse, you need to realize that you're going to spend a bunch of your time writing code that you don't need to write. Okay, things that basically duplicate the same test harness that PracticeIt has, and you're going to have to remove that code and just figure out what PracticeIt wants. Okay, so that's one thing you can do. You could still use Eclipse, but you have to strip out the test harness and then copy and paste just that code into here. And then number two, realize that if you spend a lot of time testing this in Eclipse to make sure it runs, you are spending a lot of time doing the testing that PracticeIt does for you. So that's another reason why I'd like you to use PracticeIt. All right, and I have one more topic which is completely unrelated to the other topic, but it's something that people were having problems with on the problem set. So it's not in the book explicitly how you can use strings in a loop. So let's take an example here. Suppose I've got this code here. I've got getting a string for the name, okay? And then let's try to reverse this string. So I'm going to say declare a string s reversed equals quote quote, and notice, folks, here's an example of a header. Okay, a method header. Every method needs to have a header that tells me what it's trying to do here. Okay, it doesn't need to give me the full algorithm. In fact, I really don't want the full algorithm. I just want a very short description of what it does. I can read the algorithm down here. Okay, so we start out with an empty string. Then we have to build a string similar to how we had to pad in, I think, 317. So what I want to do is, let's just think about this. I need to write a for loop. And here, let's generate the comment. So how are we going to reverse the string? Let's see. We're going to read chars off end of string and build, or let's say concatenate reverse string 1 char at a time. So I have to read the chars off the end of the string, and here I'll show you what the real work is going to be. So what I want is s reversed. Okay, so that's the string that I'm building. How do I build the new string with string concatenation? So what I do is I'm going to start off with that string s reversed. So it's initially going to be nothing, and then on the right side of that I'm going to add a new character. Okay, what is that new character? It's going to be, well, let's look at the loop here. So I'm going to need the end of the string. How do I get to the end of this string? think about what options you have available to you in the library for strings. So the length is going to be, which first of all, it's going to be the S reversed. No, actually it's not going to be reversed. It's going to be the names. That's a good bug. sname.length. Okay, and then again, it's another good reason to use intelligent names, because if I just call this S1 and S2, it's easy to make that mistake. Here, it's easy to realize, okay, I need the length of the name, and then I need to, as long as the length is greater than 0, I'm going to decrement the length, and I may be off by a character here, so we'll come back to this in a second. And then this is going to be something at, again, which string? It's going to be the name that I inputted, dot char at, and then the index is going to be the len. Okay, another thing I want to point out is that you're now experienced enough to teach you that if you're going to have a for loop and you're only going to have one line, you actually don't need the squiggly braces. Okay, now that's not recommended in the style of this book, but we don't do it so often in this class, I'm going to have to drop these squiggly braces, at least for a while. Okay, so let's think about this. So the name length, if I have a 5-character string, okay, the length will be 5, and then this is going to go char at 5. Does anyone realize the problem there? So the char at is 0 based, whereas the length is 1 based. So I got a couple options. I can either fix it here or here. Let's fix it here. So now instead of being char at 5, it's going to be char at 4. And then it's going to go 4, 3, 2, 1. And then we actually need to make this greater than or equal in order to get the 0th character. Okay, and then I'm going to change this to be the reverse is, and not the name, but the reversed. Okay, let's try this. Now this is not going to be accepted, but okay. So it's not really clear, but the reason why I'm getting this problem is because I put an uppercase there. So I got to remember, you're going to start your methods with a lowercase. So char at. Okay, so let's try this now. And so let's go down. All right, so what happened is Sammy, the reverse is Y mess. And yes, it did work. All right, so that's an example of how do you use characters or strings in a loop. Okay. One last thing that I want to mention, which is true of all these problems, is people are struggling with whenever I throw a tiny bit of a loop, not a loop, but a change from what's in the book to what is in the problem set. And that's understandable, but that is a really important part of learning to program, is things are extensible, things are modular, so that you can mix and match, you can replace things. So just because we did for loops with printlns in one chapter doesn't mean that's the only thing you can put in for loops. So when we're learning about strings, yes, now you can put strings in for loops. And we have done string concatenation before in printlns, so you can do string concatenation here as well. Pretty much that's the way Java and all programming languages want to be designed, so that you can use things wherever possible. Another name for it is orthogonality. These are not terms you need to know, but the point is you need to be able to look at the problem and kind of figure out what is the structure of the problem. You need to realize, okay, if I want to reverse a string, what I need is a for loop. And also I need to get the length of the string, so I need the length function, and I need to be able to build it, so one character at a time. So using this type of structure, you need to have all those building blocks at your disposal to be able to figure out how to do these things. So that was a lot of things, but hopefully it'll help you, because a number of people had that same problems, those 3 problems. So hopefully that gives you some hints for the future.